You are listening to Radio Alamundi.
Hi there, wherever you are. I'm Yaparucah, a freelance writer, reporter, producer, teacher, translator, tour guide, poet, singer, and songwriter. I speak several languages, and I'm the creator and founder of Radio Alamundi, an evolving podcast station where no language and all languages are spoken. It's a multilingual mix of music, poetry, lectures, languages, interviews, documentaries, recipes, and a lot more, co-produced with the students of the Alamundi International Cultural Center. You can find us on radioalamundi.bandcamp.com, podcasts.apple.com, Spotify, YouTube, Breaker, Player FM, Facebook. Search Radio Alamundi. The following narrative includes excerpts from a collection of testimonies and interviews entitled Let's Talk About It Anywhere in the World, where it is all about people's voices, accents, and speech patterns, hand in hand with my own personal anecdotes and observations. In addition to that, people are free to introduce themselves and speak their minds openly in their respective, often indigenous, languages and dialects, without any paraphrases or expectations. So let the story go on from there. It's been a while since I have watched the movie Predator starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was aware that at least one sequel had been made. What I was not aware of was the fact that there is a prequel until the day I get a notification alerting me to the release of a movie entitled Prey, which is part of the so-called Predator franchise. What makes it so special is that it is set in Indian country hundreds of years ago and is dubbed in the Comanche language. Almost the entire cast is indigenous, and the main character in the movie is a young Comanche woman who wants to become a warrior. The movie has also been dubbed in English, especially for marketing reasons, and streams on Hulu and Disney+. The story sets up the young woman against a predator. One of the co-writers is an indigenous woman by the name of Jhane Myers. She is Blackfoot and Comanche and works as a screenwriter in this case, and also as an artist, craftswoman, jewelry maker, activist, storyteller, and the list could go on forever. She was also cultural advisor for Prey, as far as clothing, language, location, and history are concerned. As a matter of fact, the plot is set in and around a Comanche village in the northern plains. And when it comes to telling stories about ancient traditions, that's easy for Jhane Myers, because she grew up that way. She doesn't speak Comanche fluently, but knows enough to correct me when she and I connect from different places in the world, and I try to speak a few Comanche words.
Hello, my name is Jhane Myers. I'm a producer. I'm also Comanche and Blackfeet, full-blood Native American, and I'm located in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Which languages do you speak?
I speak a little bit of Comanche. I know a little bit of Lakota. I live in New Mexico, so I have been studying Spanish. So I'm in beginning Spanish. And let's see, what else do I know? Oh, I know English.
Should I call you Comanche?
Namana. Namana means it's a reference to the people because Comanche was a name given to us, probably by settlers. And so that's not our name for ourselves. Every tribe has a name for themselves. So our name for Comanches is Nama. And if you want to say who we are as a people, like plural, it would be Namana. You can say Comanche or Namana. Either,
Oh.
I'm fine.
All right.
Jhane Myers lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is where she is speaking from. The key focus of our online chat is the movie Prey, which I have been able to watch. I was really surprised by the quality and accuracy, even though Jhane Myers herself explains that it is not a documentary. But it could be. The plot is loosely based on an old Comanche story Jhane Myers tells me as part of a shorter and intense conversation in which we managed to cover a lot of ground. Throughout the interview, she also displays her talent as a jewelry maker, keeping her hands busy crafting a pair of earrings. Jhane grew up in Oklahoma and eventually made it to Hollywood, where she worked in several movie projects sponsored by the prestigious Sundance Institute. So she has an impressive resume. But our conversation focuses a lot on her indigenous background and upbringing, which included shooting bows and arrows and practicing indigenous humor and teasing.
The movie starts saying the Northern Plains. And
Yes.
I would associate the Northern Plains with the Cheyenne culture and not with the Comanche culture.
Well, actually, Comanches were a nomadic culture. We were one of the first tribes to have horses. So that gave us a great mobility. So we ranged all over Northern Plains, Idaho, Washington, all the way down to the Yucatan in Mexico. So we had a really broad area, that we covered. And because, this is not a documentary. This is, an alien, picture sci-fi franchise. It's plausible that the Comanches, because you're not seeing a whole tribe. What you're seeing is a band of Comanches that are on a hunting trip. So while they're on this hunting trip, they just happen to be, trying to follow the buffalo and store meat and store supplies for the winter. So, maybe they were just following this group of buffalo, and that's why they ended up in the Northern Plains.
How common would it have been in Comanche or Blackfeet cultures for a young woman to go against the tide?
I don't really think she's going against the tide. I think she's just really trying to define herself. So you can see that like she's her own person. And one thing that Native people, we always, did as people, and we still do it today, we embrace people's decisions on who they want to be, who they, who they're trying to become. So I think she was just trying to define herself. She wanted to step up in the as a role of a hunter, within this band of Comanches. And you can even tell by like the outfit that she wears. She modified her outfit. She's not in the usual dress that most women wear, but like the way that her top is, that could have been like her dress as a young girl. Because you have to remember, us as Comanches, even true today, you only had like maybe you had a child buckskin dress, and then when you became like a teenager and you were full grown, then you had your adolescent young woman dress. You may have only had like 2 or 3 dresses your whole lifetime. So the way that her dress is designed, which I also had helped with that, kind of defines her, because maybe she didn't, we see that she has a loss of a father, right? Her father's not there. So maybe he was killed, and so she's trying to hold on to something, and she still has that dress, and the dress later becomes a top, or a longer tunic type of thing. And then she puts the leggings with it, because she's sporting with all the boys. And this kind of rang true to me, because as a young woman, I was the only girl with a group of cousins. And we used to always go shoot bows. We used to always go hunt on the creek. I was always with them. I wasn't in a dress. I was in jeans just like everybody else. I was, because I had to keep up with them. And, we have rattlesnakes in Oklahoma. We have all these other things. So, when I went hunting with my cousins, I wasn't, dressed. I guess I was a tomboy.
What sort of advice would you like to give her?
Oh, advice. I would not give her, and I'm a mother of 4. I have 4 children. So I wouldn't give her any advice. I would like to watch how her life unfolds, and if she asked me for help or asked, what I thought, I think I would offer that. But I think it's really important, when young people are trying to define themselves, that they have that space in order to define themselves in.
How could you sum it all up in one sentence?
Oh my goodness. Um, let me think. I think it would be mm, authentic adventure and action.
So where's the humor?
There's humor in a lot of things. Native people, we always have humor, even like in the toughest situations, we want to laugh. So one thing that comes to mind right away is when they're tied to the tree, and he doesn't have the experience yet with the traps, because this is a band that hasn't seen metal, hasn't seen traps. We wanted it to be like, as early, with Comanches without having so much interaction with like traders, etc. So when they're tied to the tree and she's trying to get them untied, and she says, "I'm smarter than a beaver." I mean, I think that's great. So, I mean, that's one thing that comes to mind right away.
The movie Prey, which part of you is in it?
I'm everywhere in it. Are you kidding? We shot this during the pandemic. We had a very small creative team. I'm lucky enough to have an amazing director, Daniel Trachtenberg, and he trusted my knowledge. He trusted my talent, and he trusted. And actually, I was in there. I was in there twice. You didn't see me, so you need to go back and check. But no, so I was actually. So I love this because I was able to touch every part, whether it was hair, whether it was helping to design the paint that each character wore, and designing the outfits. I actually didn't stay in my office. I set up a satellite office where the costume department was, where the hair, the makeup, and where all of the kids were doing their training. They were doing their boot camp training. So I had an office there, and it wasn't even an office. I just put up a little plastic table in case I had to do a Zoom call, so at least I could sit there. And so that I was there, and I taught classes, to the people in wardrobe. We had Stephanie Porter, who was just like a sponge. She's so creative and great, and she was able to create all these wonderful things. But I was saying what we would use at that time. We didn't have a lot of beads. We used quills. We used you see those little they look like beads, but they're actually beans. They're mescal beans. We used mescal beans. I would show them how we would cut hides, cut buckskin, roll fringe, how we used colors. We used a lot of the earth paint that was available during that time. So I did color swatches for everybody. So that way the whole thing just kind of came together in a great color scheme that were the earth paint colors that my people used during that time. So I feel like I touched everything.
Which part of the work that you have just described would be based on research, and which part would be based on personal experience?
Both, because I think when you grow up traditional, all of our things are handed down to us. So I was raised, and this came up in an interview not too long ago. I was raised by my grandparents. I'm the oldest grandchild, and when that happens, the grandparents have the option of raising that child. So I was raised, I knew how to, make moccasins. I knew how to cut buckskin. I knew how to do all of these things. And in turn, my grandmother, her mother had died from consumption, tuberculosis when she was young. So I ended up having to, she was raised by her grandparents. So I was raised with knowledge, that was 4 generations away from myself. So yes, we have, books during that time. There's not a lot of cultural artifacts. I've been able to, go study different things that are in museums, like the National Museum of the American Indian. I worked for 8 years for the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture here in New Mexico. So, I've been able to interact with a lot of different things and learn different techniques and, historical things. But I think that, it was my cultural knowledge, because I actually knew how to do this. You can get an academic and they can tell you what they read, and that doesn't translate to somebody unless you can And in fact, I'm sitting here actually, I was trying to work on some earrings to wear during this thing. So, you hand somebody the materials, and if they can actually create it, that's worth more than 100 books, right? Because it was handed down through our traditional, oratory knowledge.
How can you define beauty?
Oh, I live here in the Southwest, and one of the reasons why I live here is just because of its beauty, and what you just described in Navajo, it's called Najoni Hajli. So walking in beauty. So I was actually, and that's in their language. So I think it's really important. My great aunt, who is, one person that helped raise me as well, was the founding. She was on the founding faculty for the Institute of American Indian Arts when it first started out here. And so Jhane Myers, WAP. And she always taught me, no matter what area you're in, you need to learn something from that tradition. So even though I have my cultural, plains traditions that I know how to make and I know how to do, I spent 3 years here at the Poe Center in jewelry making classes, and I make silver jewelry. I know how to silversmith, and because that was one thing I wanted to learn from the Southwest. So I think I can kind of do it all. I have tools. I have all kinds of things here. So
what is your favorite tool?
I don't know. I'm sitting here and I was trying to decide which pair I like the best. So maybe it's I like pliers. I have like 3 different sets of pliers sitting here. I have cutters to cut metal and everything. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind working, on everything, getting my hands dirty. It doesn't bother me.
Please tell us a story we might not know about your ancestors.
Okay, I'll tell you a story. And this story I actually used as part of the script because we were trying to think of something to weave the story together. So the Comanches, as you know, were fierce warriors, and they wore leggings that had a lot of fringe on it. And there were many different stories on why it had that long fringe on the bottom of their leggings. Some people said that when they walked, the fringe brushed away their footprints or their tracks. Some people said, when people were in high regard, they made them have long fringe because they didn't spend a lot of time walking. They were on horseback. So they had this as just ornamentation. But, Comanches were such fierce warriors, lords of the plains. So sometime when they were fighting and, they just saw a multitude of people coming, and if they were unseated from their horse, they would take an arrow or they would take a lance, and they would just stake themselves to the ground through that fringe that's on their leggings. And they would stake them, and that's called standing your ground. So that meant that they were fighting to the death. That's where they would be. They're not running. They're not moving. They're going to fight right there, until the end. And so that was a tradition, standing your ground. So that's where, we developed and used, you go no further. This is as far as you go. So that's how we modified that story where it's in there. So it was really nice because we did a screening for the Comanche people, and a lot of, we had the Comanche elders there. A lot of people were there. And when they saw that, they were like, oh my God, that's what we would do. That's in our history. That's part of our oral tradition and our stories. So I think that's like, that would be my appropriate story for today.
What historical event in the past would you like to have witnessed?
I would have liked to have witnessed this, because in our mythology, in our tribe, we have this monster, and it's called Pia Mupits. And Pia Mupits means like big monster. But when people describe it, it's like the predator. Small eyes, comes out at night, kills people, kills children, grabs children. That's what, like our children's story that we scare children with. You better be good, or you better stop crying, or Pia Mupits is going to hear us. And then they'll come and find us. So yeah, we have like those stories about Pia Mupits, which is, when he's described, similar to this. So when I first read this script, I was like, oh, I know who this is. We have this. So that was something, for me that kind of rang true. And I told Dan about it, and he was like, really? And, Dan was just great, soaking up all the history. So, it's not too far off. I'd like to kind of see something like that, because supposedly we had that. We also had Nunapis, which were little people, like these little, and who knows where they came from, and then other civilizations have that, fairies or, dwarves or, like little people, but we had those too, Nunapis.
What was your favorite children's game?
My children's game, I like shooting bows and arrows. I really did. That was like my main thing. And when I was, I guess, preteen, I guess, early teen, I was a champion. So that was kind of my thing. So I would just like my cousins and I would go out and try to pretend that we were in these different situations and we were back in the past, and that we were hunting things or, shooting bullfrogs or, just other kind of things. So, we liked to do that until like the sun started coming down and we got tired and hungry. So we realized we had to go back home and eat. But growing up in the country, that's like the best thing about it. You can just use your imagination and play and be whatever you need to be.
Like most indigenous people, does Jhane Myers have to reconcile her traditional upbringing with the modern world. But she doesn't let that get in the way of whatever new project she might be working on.
How much do you think before it's all right?
I think that being able to have a traditional background allows you to live more comfortably because you're more grounded in your own tradition, and it never bothers me. I mean, I've always worked for companies or organizations or in the industry where, people had like more of a traditional background. Like when I first got out of school, I went to work, or a little bit after school, I went to work in the fashion industry and I worked for Ralph Lauren. And if you think about that company, because Native people are born with, we grow up with core values. So we have Native core values. And so Ralph Lauren's traditional family values and core values were like a lot, very similar to me as being Native. So I never had an issue working with them and, working within that organization. So I think having that traditional grounding really helps you. And even to this day, being a filmmaker, well, my son is a model. So we all modeled in 2019, I think, for the Ralph Lauren holiday campaign. So this is the first time that they had a Native family that were a real family, not just models. And two of my daughters were in there. And then later, the pandemic hit. And so when the pandemic hit, they called me and they're like, Jhane, you work as a producer, right? And I said, yes. And they said, could you produce a segment for a holiday campaign for your, since you already know our company and our traditions, et cetera, could you produce this for us? And I said, absolutely. So I brought my father in, who has since passed, but I brought my father in. We were all on horseback. And not only did I produce this, I directed our segment. And, it was in the 2020 Ralph Lauren holiday campaign. So, I think that, if I didn't have these core values and if I was, just something else, I don't want to be anything else other than being a Native person. So, it's helped me.
What are you working on right now?
I can't tell you. No, just kidding. I showed you. I'm working on making these earrings, but actually, no. I have because I have a fine art background. I don't know if you read this in my bio, but I'm also a fine artist, an award-winning fine artist. We just had Indian Market here this past weekend in Santa Fe, which is the largest Native fine art market, and film is a fine art. So I personally enjoy blending all of those together because rarely do you find like one person that can bring all these different dimensions to a project. And that's what inspires me. So I look for projects where, I read it and if it needs my help on the script or if I could change something or, enhance story or work, with costume or work with, anything set, that's what really inspires me, as a person. I don't want to be sitting, behind a desk and, working on a computer all day. But, something like that is really energizing. So I have a couple of projects that are, you'll see me again. If that's what you're asking, you will see me again.
Eventually, our talk turns into a practice of storytelling, especially when I give Jhane Myers the beginning of an indigenous story from the Pacific Northwest to complete. Not only is Jhane Myers up to the task, but she also tells me that she's been up there before she turns around, grabs a statue, and shows it to me, saying that it was made by no other than the late Rick Bartow, who was one of my best friends. So, with a mutual acquaintance like this, sort of a bond develops between Jhane and me, and we know that we will meet and visit again anytime, anywhere in the world. So, the story goes on from there.
In the beginning, the mountains thought they were people. How does the story go on from there?
Well, the mountains thought they were people because they grew from Turtle Island, and they listened to the raven because the raven is a trickster, and the raven was just trying to get the mountains high enough to help him steal the moon or to steal the sun.
I should tell that story to some native people I know up in the Pacific Northwest and see how they go from there. So you choose the raven, which is typical of the Pacific Northwest, and not the coyote or the spider.
Yes, because I have a background in Northwest culture. So, like if you look behind me, this is Rick Bartow. And then I also, if I could show you, if I showed you my living room above me, I have a big feast canoe that's from the Pacific Northwest. So I know I've read up and I've studied their mythology, and you know that Raven steals the moon, or Raven tries to always steal the sun, and the Raven is the trickster. So yes.
Rick Bartow was one of my best friends.
Was he? Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
had the pleasure of meeting him. Probably about. I was married to a sculptor from the Northwest. So and remember Rick had his band, so he even gave me the CD. So yeah, so thank you for appreciating Rick's art. And he also gave me, I have in the guest bedroom, I have a sandpiper that he made as well.